Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we've got one of our great Open to Hope authors on today, and I'm excited to be talking about her book. And we're going to be also talking about adults coping with death in the family. So you want to introduce our guest?
Sure. Our guest today is Becky Aud-Jennison. And Becky is a writer for the Open to Hope Foundation. So she writes for us. You can go to our foundation site and read what she's written. So she is also no stranger to loss. She has lost her father, mother, and brother. She is the creator of the Death Dialogues Project. She is trained as a nurse and a therapist. And she is the author of Death and Its Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Beautiful Lessons, and the book, The Stars Spoke. Welcome to the show, Becky.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We have a lot of adults that are, the trauma of losing a family member when you're an adult, adults losing parents, adults losing siblings. I know with your background, you started out, your father died when you, 21?
Yeah, 22, yes.
And you also had an ambivalent relationship with him, which I want to get to after we fast forward to the fact that you lost your brother 5 years ago. And then your 93-year-old mother, shortly after that? Yeah.
Yeah, 9 months.
Yeah. And you've been in the world of grief and loss with your death dialogues and your podcast, and you've been storytelling about grief for years and years, right?
Well, basically, I'd been working around grief and loss for almost my whole adult life. And it was after my brother died 5 years ago that the project was born.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to ask you, in retrospect, Heidi and I were talking about this because her brother died in her 20s and her dad died about a year and a half ago. What did you see differently in your 20s about a loss that you did as an adult and, an older adult with your brother, your mother?
Well, I think what it taught me more than anything is that it's about relationship. And the relationship for me, it was about the relationship I had with the person rather than it just the fact that it was a family member. So for my father, he was a very complicated, troubled man who had a very pleasant public persona. So a lot of people didn't know that, but was very filled with rage at home. And so my mother was the only one still in the household then, and she was still getting the brunt of that. And so I was very shocked that we were able to come from a place of compassion with my father. He was, by the time he got to the hospital, he was brain dead. But we had this vigil, which I sometimes feel like things happen the way they're meant to happen in different times in our lives. And this was certainly one where it felt like full circle. We were given this opportunity while he wasn't officially dead to be in this room with him for 8 hours. And my brothers, especially, I'm the youngest. My youngest brother that died was 7 years older than me. And my oldest is 15 years older than me. And we were able to, they were all able to sit by him and hold a vigil. And, times we would leave a person alone and talk. And then later, I was shocked because there was a sense of relief for my mom and I. She was no longer in danger. She was no longer in fear. She felt like a bird who'd been released from a cage. There was some beauty with that, but I was still shocked at the little girl inside that was missing the father that I could have had, more than I was missing the father that I had, even because he had so many positive sides that he'd shown the world. And so I always knew, and how he would be with my friends. So I always knew what it could look like if I had that father. The biggest take home for me with that is, that it is about the quality, the connection, the relationship. And that for me, the depth of my grief totally correlates to the depth of the relationship I had with that person. Now, since my mother and brother died, I had another brother who died as well, who was
Wow.
found dead, and two in-laws. And we had 5-6 deaths in rapid succession. And definitely could feel the difference in those. With my brother, probably the most heart tugging and tearing me apart and putting me back together differently, as I say, was probably my brother, who was just, and my mother to a degree, but we know at 93, we had been openly transitioning. She was very vocal. It was a beautiful thing. Her whole last 6 months of life and leading up to her death, and even her death was a magical transition of sorts. So there was some piece to that, but my brother was a very young 60, at the time, and very, very young and spirit filled. And he was the person that was everybody's rock, but my biggest support. I didn't realize how much of a pyramid we were of strength in our family and how much we depended on. So having those two pieces gone and floating around on my own, I still feel like I'm free floating sometimes, because I just don't have that constant, they were the people, they were my people.
They were your go-to people.
From birth, from birth.
Well, and it is interesting to lose a sibling. I mean, my brother died when I was 20. We come into the world in relatively the same time, even though if there's an age difference, we expect to grow old together, and we expect to die relatively around the same time. And like you said, 60 is young for somebody dying. So I'm sure, expected to have many more years with your brother on the earth, and we are parallel travelers in life together.
And I expected him to be at least on the other end of the phone as I was going through my mother's death. And, that was maybe the biggest first sucker punch was, wow, we were going to do this together. I talk about the great mystery a lot, but I still have a relationship with them. I mean, I go for a walk on the beach and I talk out loud to them. And there's times that I feel, I say my team, because I'm not sure who all's on my team, but I've got, quite a few loved ones over there now. And, the first time I became a grandma, my grandmother lived with us and died of leukemia when I was 3 years old. And I do remember her. I was yet to be 3. And I do remember her. And, the first grandbaby I had, I thought, well, goodness, if I ever wanted to believe in a guardian angel, of course, she's been up there looking out for me.
I love that. I love that visual.
Well, tell us about how people can get in touch with you. And I know you do a podcast, and they can go on our site and find some of your writing there. And tell us again about your book and what you're doing.
Yeah, so the book was basically born out of the project, but also out of my career. I conducted dignity therapy with people who were in their last 6 months of life, based on the work of Harvey Chechenov, who spearheaded it in Canada, a palliative psychiatrist. And that was some of the most rewarding work of my life. But I've also just been by the bedside. And then in my practice as a therapist, sat with many grieving people, always feeling now that I didn't serve as well as I could until after my own profound loss. But it was the stories, from what I am hearing, that people want. They want to hear other people's stories. And just as we talked about the death in my own family, there's just no cookie cutter death. It doesn't matter, all fathers' deaths are not going to be the same. All sibling deaths are not going to be the same. I could contrast that, and I do in the book. And then the star spoke about the relationship with my other brother was totally different. And so people tell me that they're just looking to hear that people have survived.
So you
in
can
those-
find that on your Death Dialogues project, right? On your website?
deathdialogues.net, Instagram, Death Dialogue, the Death Dialogues Project, Facebook, the Death Dialogues Project. And the books, you can just, they're at bookshops and online bookshops. So be able to find those.
Death and It's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Beautiful Lessons, and The Stars Spoke. And visit her on our site at Open to Hope. It's so great to have you on today, Becky. I'm really
Thank
happy
you
to
so
talk to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your good work.
Becky, thank you so much for keeping this dialogue open and for being an example of somebody that has had tremendous amounts of loss and yet still has found hope and meaning in life. Thank you.
And thanks
My pleasure.
everybody for joining us on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you, if you lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.